Hi there. How's everyone doing? This is Kathryn with the Kenney Book Break, and today I'm going to share a poem I really like that I have in my book of poems that I save. My daughter made this a really long time ago, and I have cartoons from the New Yorker and poems I like. And this one is called The Wait, and it's by a poet named Linda Gregg. Two horses were put together in the same paddock, night and day, in the night and in the day, wet from heat and the chill of the wind on it, muzzle to water, snorting, head swinging, and the taste of bay in the shadowed air. The dignity of being, they slept that way, knowing each other always. Withers quivering for a moment, fetlock and the proud rise at the base of the tail, width of back, the volume of them and each other's weight. Fences were nothing compared to that. People were nothing. They slept standing, their throats curved against the other's rump. They breathed against each other, whinnied and stomped. There are things they did that I do not know. The privacy of them had a river in it, had our universe in it, and the way its border looks back at us with its light. This was finally their freedom. The freedom an oak tree knows, that is built at night by stars. I love that ending. This was finally their freedom, the freedom an oak tree knows, that is built at night by stars. All right, that's my poem that I wanted to share. And then we're back to Rare Encounters with Ordinary Birds by Lyanda Lynn Haupt, Notes from a Northwest Year. And this chapter is called The Presence of Birds, a Very New Life List. And it has a picture of binoculars and pen and paper. And for those of you who don't know, a life list is someone's bird list that they keep for their whole life, and they add to it when they see a bird they have not seen before. It's a very bird nerdy thing to do, and I don't really do it. I don't do it, even though I pay a lot of attention to birds and sometimes write them down. Maybe I should start one. The Presence of Birds, a Very New Life List. Squinting across the waves, I make quick pencil notes in my little book. Brown pelican, surf scoter, double-crested cormorant. What are you doing? Tom asks. Nothing. Common loon. No, you're doing something. I see you. You're writing, and you're being sneaky. Honey, I'm not being sneaky. I'm making a life list. Here. Bald eagle. But you've already seen all these birds. I've seen all these birds, and I'm not even a birder. It's a gorgeous day on the Washington coast. Though it's late August, we feel the sharp breeze that is nearly ever present on this rocky beach. And the ocean is gray, sparkling darkly. I'm afraid to tell Tom the truth. Well, it's not my list. He waits. It's hers. I point to my enormous belly. I figure if I'm matter of fact, I can slip this by him. Hers? Our babies. Tom looks at me straight and long. He stares at the water and back at me. Finally, he speaks in a gentle voice as if he believes me to be unstable, and any harsh words will send me completely over the edge. Honey, he touches me sweetly on the shoulder, breaking the news. Honey, our baby is not born yet. She can't have a life list. Undaunted by Tom's bad attitude, I carry on with the task at hand. Look, sweetie, an osprey, sanderlings, black oyster catchers. Oh, what a good day for our little girl. A life list is a record of all the bird species one has ever seen. Birders might keep various lists, a backyard list, a state list, a year list, an international list, but the real list, the one that serious birders from this neck of the world refer to when they speak of their own life lists, includes birds seen within the parameters of the American Birding Association's official North American list area, which includes Canada and the 49 continental United States, the French islands of Saint Pierre et Miquelon, and their adjacent waters. 600 species put you squarely in the ranks of the hardcore. It might seem innocuous enough, but this list keeping can easily get out of hand. I heard a story about a couple whose birding vacation in Arizona ended in divorce after he spotted a bird she needed for her own life list, and, in the spirit of bitter competition, refused to point her in the bird's direction. I know birders who, in addition to placing a check mark next to a new bird on their list, a so-called lifer, will also enter a dollar amount. This represents the expenses involved in chasing down the rare bird. Airfare, motor inn, rental car, fast food. In a term borrowed from British birders, such people are referred to as twitchers, in allusion to the check marks or twitches compulsively added as rarities are chased across the nation. More ecologically oriented birders must officially go on record as being opposed to mere twitching, where birders swoop down in their rented car, take a quick glance at the bird they seek, gasp and proclaim it beautiful or not, twitch and scoop away again. Such a practice, it is argued, reduces birds to the two-dimensionality of baseball cards and utterly neglects matters of true import: behavior, ecology, conservation status, the honing of honest observational skills, respect, love. Still, many holistic naturalists have some of the longest life lists I know. As much as I try to stay away from the list or not to list fray, it is impossible to avoid the bird listing question entirely. Rank strangers who spy you with a pair of binoculars about your neck want to know if you keep one. Friend birders are curious about how many species you have seen, eager to compare notes. Responding to such inquiries, I always lie. I don't keep a list, I say. It seems that the idea of a list says something about a person and about the way that person interacts with birds, something not necessarily true. In terms of definitions, maintenance of a life list appears to be the deed that catapults a person from being a bird watcher, someone who enjoys birds and even knows the names of species that frequent their yard or summer cottage, to someone who actively and perhaps competitively seeks birds for fun, challenge, sport, or love. Some suggest a loose continuum from bird watcher to birder to ornithologist. I have to think this idea of a linear progression is mostly misguided. Some backyard birders I know a great deal more about the natural history of avian species than do serious birders. Some ornithologists can identify very few birds beyond the couple of species that they might study in depth for their academic research. Some birders are holistic in their approach, engaged in many intellectual dimensions of the ornithological and ecological sciences, as well as being brilliant at avian identification. Some birders are not. Some appropriate birds according to their knowledge of taxonomic order, some by a looser aesthetic sense based on size and shape, and some entirely by song and vocalizations. In this latter group, I know a birdsong expert who categorizes vocalizations into common sense types of sounds such as buzzing, warbling, and trills. Another, a concert pianist, classifies the birdsong that reaches his trained ears according to a musical scheme with attention to pitch and timbre, complex phrasing, and rhythmic variation. I know people who can at a glance identify nearly any North American bird that enters their peripheral vision, but once they name it, can tell you nothing further about it. Others can name very few, but hold an intimate knowledge of the lives of certain species based on observation, deep and careful attendance over time. We twitter over labels for all these manners of watching, and we fail. Human interaction with birds is a highly individual art. I have come to believe that altogether anyone might learn to identify birds with moderate proficiency. Some people have a predisposition toward it, a disposition that others lack entirely. My father-in-law, Al, is an academic by nature and trade, with a remarkable mind. He's able to catalog minute details in his own fields of history and literature, details that he calls to mind with stunning accuracy. My in-laws moved to the Northwest a couple of years ago, into a house by a stream with maples and willows and lots of birds. Since they expressed interest, I bought them a field guide. At first, when Al called me with questions about the birds he was seeing, I fully expected long and intricate accounts of the species in question. Instead, he would say something like, "What's the bird we saw in our tree today? It was medium-sized and brown." Did it have any markings? Anything on the head or wings? I don't think so, but I can't say for sure. Did it hang upside down, I'd ask? Was it part of a flock of birds that looked the same? He wasn't sure. We share varieties of this conversation over and over again. I find it both endearing and terribly curious. Here's a man who can recite minutiae from some obscure book on early American history he read 12 years ago, but he can't describe with any sort of reliable accuracy the bird that perched in front of his nose that afternoon. I have to remind myself that this is, of course, a very normal condition. The idea that one must note specific subtle marks and behaviors in order to identify a bird is something that, for most people, is learned with varying degrees of effort. My mother is another case altogether. Not the least bit bookish, she will tell me that she saw a bird alone by the water with a white breast and brown back that bobbed up and down while leaning forward, spotted sandpiper. A small hawk with a square head and a long tail in a tree. It stood up straight on long, skinny yellow legs, sharp-shinned hawk. She has a gift for seeing the salient points that might differentiate one bird from another, even if she doesn't know what bird it is. And she somehow knows that a bird's color, what most of us would think to start with, is not necessarily the most helpful thing. I think of this as a kind of bird aptitude, and people who have it are able to learn birds quickly and easily. It's not unlike a math aptitude. I remember a young man, Clinton, who sat in the back of my high school trigonometry class rolling those strange many-sided dice used by Dungeon and Dragon aficionados. He scarcely paid attention to the instructor, but could quickly whip out assignments and pass tests with accuracy and a certain finesse. Meanwhile, I worked and worked, racking my mathematically simple mind. We both did tolerably well in the class, but for Clinton it was effortless, while for me it was terrible trouble and I utterly lacked finesse. The very nice thing about all this, of course, is that the variety of birdwatching personalities, while not all necessarily suited to a life of radical bird listing, are perfectly suited. I have heard that learning a bird's name is a starting point to further knowledge, but I think this point comes earlier still, in the first observation of an individual bird. In the field one day, I saw two young women with Peterson's Field Guide to Western Birds. I lifted my binoculars to the nice duck-filled pond before us and innocuously eavesdropped. They were studying their book with rich attention, comparing various plates to the bird before them, a rather common small duck called a green-winged teal. The duck sat obligingly on the pond as they cross-checked its various marks, comparing it with the plates in their book. They were quietly jubilant, patting each other's arms and smiling as they correctly concluded the teal's identity. There is a point in identifying a new species at which you understand suddenly, almost viscerally, yes, that is what it is. I felt a pang of jealousy at the newness of their discovery, remembering the first bird beyond the confines of my backyard list that I tediously identified on my own, the pelagic cormorant. There is a quiet exhilaration that comes in discovering for yourself, using binoculars, field guide, your innate wits, and a willing subject, the name of a bird new to you. There is a change, a shift, and it somehow feels mutual, something between you and the bird. With practice, the process of identification becomes less tedious and eventually second nature. Second nature, of course, unless you are someone who cannot identify birds, not at all, not ever. These people exist. In a coastal bird class I taught recently, a group of about 20 of us were watching shorebirds on the Oregon coast. I will admit that shorebirds are a particularly challenging group. Lots of small birds in shades of brown scampering about on the rocks and sand. Their identification often lies in the intricate details of particular feathers. But this was a beginning class, and we were just picking out some of the easiest birds. On the beach was a tall bird with a straight, longish bill called a greater yellowlegs. Easy to remember since its long legs are truly lemon yellow. A whimbrel, another large bird with a long curved bill and non-yellow legs, was also present. There were several small semi-palmated plovers, perhaps the cutest of North American shorebirds, black-backed with white belly and white-bellied, with a broad brown band across the breast, orange bill, and enormous eyes. Amid all these wandered a mixed group of western and leaf sandpipers that, because they are difficult to tell apart at first, we didn't worry about too much. We had been with the birds for nearly an hour and had the chance for careful observation. Most of the people in the group got a handle on these birds quite quickly and started to take good field notes on their physical and behavioral differences. But there was one woman in the group who could not tell the birds apart at all. Not the big from the small, not the distinctly dark brown plovers from the mottled sandpipers. She could not even get a sense that the yellowlegs, easily a foot taller than the leaf sandpiper, was actually a different species. I was baffled. One bird was huge, another was tiny. Could she see that? I know that you think you can tell those birds apart, she told me earnestly, but they all look like little small brown birds to me. The rest of the class and I tried not to stare in disbelief. She thought all of us were nuts. But the great thing about bird watching is this. We all loved it. We all had a great day. While part of the class worked on their notes and some of the more serious students started to focus on distinguishing between the westerns and leasts, the hopeless identifier woman pulled her broad-brimmed straw hat further down over her forehead. She took out a notebook, fit for a Mona Lisa-like smile upon her lips, and composed 14 lines in iambic pentameter, an actual shorebird sonnet. Later, she read it to the class as we recouped in a shady park, and we all clapped. I wish I could hear that now. I like to think that Claire and I do not chase birds, nor do we twitch. Even so, now that Claire is 4 months old, her life list is quite substantial. In our backyard, she enjoys the presence of northern flickers, Steller's jays, American robins, and dark-eyed juncos. At the Puget Sound beaches near our home, she observes horned grebes, red-breasted mergansers, common and Barrow's goldeneyes, and her personal favorite, small flocks of the very delicate brant goose. At Green Lake Park, she adds a variety of waterfowl, gadwall, American widgeon, pie-billed grebe, American coot, and even a lone Eurasian widgeon. She has seen in her special baby way 6 species of gull. Now that my little project is out in the open, I flaunt it to irk Tom for fun. Excellent, I announce on a recent ferry trip. Claire doesn't have redneck grebe yet. She doesn't have anything, Tom informs me, getting a bit self-righteous. He starts making rules. She can't have a list until she can identify the birds herself. Well, that seemed a bit strict to me. Besides, I firmly believe that Claire can see and assimilate the world's creatures, even if she can't yet speak their names. I hold her up to the ferry railing, blinking in the wind. Next to us, a man is pointing at a dark flock of birds floating on the water. See the duckies? He coos to his toddler. Unwilling to chance Claire's becoming tainted by such ambiguity, I whisper, "Look, sweetie, white-winged scoters." Claire giggles and opens her mouth wide in a goofy, toothless grin that melts my heart. Why am I keeping a life list of birds for my small daughter? I make up all kinds of reasons for Tom, just to see what he'll say. I want Claire to get ahead of all the hotshot birder tots she'll meet in preschool. My birder ex-boyfriend's child is 3 years old and has an unfair advantage on Claire. She must catch up. I want to prepare her for a brilliant ornithological career. I want her to stabilize her ego via an impressive life list. Now, none of these are true. The real reason is simple. In my experience, birds are as fine and appropriate a lens through which to assimilate life as anything else. A list of the birds one has seen can unspool a ribbon of detail. The chance occurrences that create our singular lives, the minutiae that might be lost in the clutter were it not for this unique kind of record. Claire is only 4 months old, but looking at her life list of birds, the discerning reader might apprehend a great deal about the world that has shaped her development as a young human. Claire was born and has lived in the Pacific Northwest, varied thrush, Oregon junco. She dwells near water, brant, horned grebe, and has ventured out upon its openness, marbled murrelet. She has visited the wet forests that characterize her home, winter wren. Claire has a large tree outside her nursery window, connecting her small yard with nearby conifers and apple trees. Steller's jay, northern flicker. Claire's wider home has maintained enough ecological integrity to support the largest of avian predators, bald eagle, and there are fish, osprey. Claire has gazed at watery coastlines and has lifted her small eyes skyward at the flash of a large dark shadow, great blue heron. The absence of certain birds is just as telling. Though she may sense the inkling of warmth, the lengthening of days that has us all dreaming desperately of spring, Claire has so far been a winter child, knowing this season only. There is no rufous hummingbird yet, no yellow warbler. What this list says is that my new daughter has lived already in the unique company of wild non-human beings, that her life is entwined inextricably with a wider natural world, a world that will continue to reveal itself effortlessly over time. I remember when I was in college, overhearing my mother saying to her friends, "Yes, Lyanda, she's quite a bird watcher." "Mother," I was indignant, "it's birder, not bird watcher. Will Claire be a birder? If it brings her joy, I certainly hope she is, but in truth I care not a whit. My wish for my new daughter is that she will be a true watcher of birds, or perhaps a watcher of mushrooms or beetles or snakes or rocks, that she will choose her own lens into the natural world, know it deeply and well, with a wisdom cultivated in travel, in experience of home, with friends, with love, through the whole of her life. But for now, I keep this list. I love to think of the birds, including the common birds, the feathered arbiters of everyday life that await Claire as this life list grows. I see in my mind the species that will grace and unfold her days as she lives in the presence of birds. All right, that is chapter 3. Our next chapter is the thrush and the fairy. And I hope that you are doing well and seeing some birds outside your windows on these sunny days. They are certainly singing around here and busy. Until next time, take care.